Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this podcast was recorded via Skype and several mobile phones. So please excuse audio irritations, echoes and strange noises throughout this podcast.
Okay, let's go.
Rapidly growing.
Non-native tree species.
Consuming.
Alien tree species.
Adapting.
Exotic species.
They conquer.
Benefit.
Invasive species.
Strong bark beetle attack.
Risk.
Alien or a non-native.
Resistance. Heat. Timber market. Ecosystem services. Recreational use. Pests.
Jeopardizing local economies.
Perception. Public. Biodiversity. Urban trees. Resilience. Future. Climate change. Global change.
And devastating entire ecosystems.
We are talking about ALPTREES. That's an INRAE Alpine Space funded project.
You are listening to the second episode of a series of podcasts concerning the use and management of non-native tree species in the alpine space. If you want to hear about basic information and about the obstacles of the project ALPTREES, please listen to the first episode to get the background information from our lead partner Katharina Lapin. Today we want to give our partners from France the opportunity to present themselves.
Bonjour, I am Fred Berger. I am a forest engineer and a forest researcher. I'm working in a French institute which is called INRAE, which is the result of a merging between two research centers in France. And INRAE is one of the biggest agriculture, land and forest research centers of France. I'm working in a mountain area, and my main purpose is dealing with protection forest against natural risk and all other nature-based solutions for mitigating natural risk, including also forest fires, snow avalanches, rockfall, and so on.
I'm Patricia Detry from Cerema.
Salut.
I'm a forester, a urban planner too. At Cerema, I'm working on the concept of ecosystem services to assess and map the ecosystem services. And I'm working on green infrastructure since 10 years. And I am in Aix-en-Provence.
At the first sight, foresters and urban planners don't have so much in common. But when it comes to non-native trees, they have much more in common than we think. Before I learned about forestry, forest management, I had this naive idea the forest which I visit on the weekends is grown like it is without any help, without any assistance, and it's fully naturally. Then I learned about forest management and forest engineers all over the world managing and maintaining forests, not only for the production of timber, but also for preservation of the forest ecosystems. So forest engineers are kind of the architects of forests. They decide which tree species are planted when and where, which trees are large enough, old enough to be harvested, or if they are harvested at all. They decide how the forest regenerates and what management options they have. So they are quite important for our project in ALPTREES because they have a lot of knowledge, local knowledge, which is often not published in scientific paper or not written in a book. You need to get in touch with forest engineers, with those who are really working in the forest to get all this knowledge from them and share it with others.
I'm working a lot with my colleague of the Cerema from the regional center of Lyon, because they're also working with natural risk, with landslide, with rockfall, and we are in a close connection because we have made a lot of development on nature-based solution, on forestry-based solution, and they are more from the field of civil engineering, but also we are working with the other center of Cerema that are more working on nature-based solution and all the place where natural environment can be improved for land use management.
INRAE is more research structure, and we are more in contact with the municipalities, and we are the link between the research and the development in the territory.
Is your expertise something that municipalities ask for?
It depends on the concept that you are working on. because the concept of ecosystem services is welcome to the municipalities.
Why is that?
All the efforts that made to preserve natural areas can bring them economic solution.
Katharina, please explain ecosystem services.
So ecosystem services means that nature creates for us fresh air, clean water, natural resources which we use. Also provides us with a lot of invisible services. We all like to go into the forest on the weekend. This is a service the forest provides to us. So ecosystem services are an interdisciplinary concept, and you find it in all parts of political agendas. It also goes up to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So we all follow this concept in a certain way. For at least the last decade, we try to identify them and see where non-native tree species can support ecosystem services and where they are actually a risk to these ecosystem services.
You can prove them that they are right to protect natural areas. We are in the time now to present this concept.
I think an important point is that they are recovering ecosystem services in the way that in the past it has been very well used, maybe 1 or 2 centuries ago. And now politicians, they are understanding that nature-based solution could be a very economical mitigation measures or a good help for them in order to earn money. Where the nature is making the job, you don't have to do any investment, or you have to do very small investment in order just to help nature-based solutions.
Of course, municipalities not just recently undiscovered ecosystem services of their patches of land. Of course not. It's been a long process of people like Fred and Patricia who teach them how to see the ecosystems and their services. So I would say it's a matter of the last decades where this has been undiscovered and how to implement this into the municipalities' day-to-day business.
So that's very important for them, because maybe with this they can reallocate part of the budget to things where nature-based solutions are not efficient. So this is quite important, and as said Patricia, the first point is to map, to show them where nature-based solutions or ecosystem services are very important, and how is the cost to manage these ecosystem services. And since we can prove them that they will earn money with that, they will give us the green light in order to push in this direction.
Areas, just like forests, have for a very long time been kind of undiscovered when it comes to the functions they have, apart from the obvious agricultural forester benefit. So today, municipalities, thanks to people like Fred and Patricia, have learned that these natural areas can have also an economic benefit for the inhabitants and for the owners as well.
Just to give you a very clear example, in France we have what we call the PPRN, which is Natural Risk Plan Prevention. And now, with all the job that has been done since, let's say, 30 years now, we have been able to prove that, for example, against rockfall risk, if you have a good forest among a road or houses, then it will cost around 10 to 20 times less than if you have to put civil engineering. So now there is a new regulation in France explaining that if you want to integrate this specific ecosystem services of forest, then you have to do it.
We have new contracts in progress in France, ecological transition contract, and many municipalities contract this contract. It's about ecological transition and ecosystem services. So we have 3 contracts in the Mediterranean region that we are following. We are assessing ecosystem services in Massif des Morts, which would be our test region for ALPTREES, Pays Arles, it's near Marseille, and another contract is in the north of Nice. This is a new deal with the municipalities and the Ministry of Environment to take account the new approach with nature-based solutions.
Nature-based solutions are solutions which will help to mitigate and adapt for climate change. Forests are one of the most discussed nature-based solutions in European but also in worldwide policies, globally there are so many activities on planting trees and planting forests because they can store CO2, which is so dangerous for us. But very little discussions are going on which tree species should be selected for these nature-based solutions.
Very important in France, non-native trees are considered on non-ecological development. Only 8% of our forests are with non-native trees. So it's very, very few. Douglas fir is a non-native tree identified in our French forests, but few non-native trees are used for our forests. Poplars, Douglas fir, black pines, and it's over. This is a non-ecological idea for the French population to have non-native trees in their areas.
I think that non-native trees, people are used to sow them in garden, in park. If we are looking 2 or 5 centuries ago, in the park there were almost non-native trees because it was a way to express that people were traveling all around the world. It was a question of displaying the power of the state with the colonies and these kind of things. So people are quite used with the view of non-native trees, but they have no idea what is behind.
One of the main challenges of ALPTREES is to cover very different landscapes. So Fred, for example, works in mountain regions, while many other partners work in urban areas. We need to find solutions, decision-making tools, which apply for non-native trees in different landscapes.
I will talk for the north part of the French Alps. I think that for people, if you are talking about non-native trees, the first perception for them is invasive trees. They don't see the other part, the hidden face of non-native trees definition. So the first thing that they are going to talk about is about even tree, it's about pseudoacacia, these kind of trees that are growing very fast and they're using a big place of the land. But they have no well perception on, for example, some spruce that we are using in the North Alps. They are not native trees. They are coming, for example, from America or these kind of things. So the first thing is to give them a clear definition on the good channel of communication in order to explain all the different faces of what is behind non-native trees. This is not only invasive species.
A very important part in communication on non-native tree species is how the public sees the non-native tree species. Many people automatically think about the negative impacts of non-native tree species. That, for example, is the change of the landscape, the change of different exotic tree species in natural ecosystem, and so on. In very few cases, positive things of non-native tree species come up. But we tend to forget that we use non-native tree species already everywhere. In cities, there is barely a park without non-native tree species. In this context, I think it's important that we see both sides.
Everything is not white and everything is not black, let's say like that. I think that non-native trees are good opportunities for foresters in order to have a sustainable income, and they have to manage it. And dealing with climate change problems. For example, there is a big deal in France about Picea abies, spruce, in the way that we are not sure that they are still well adapted to the climatic condition in the Northern Alps. And one of the main problems is that everything is dedicated to the silvicultural management of spruce in order to have economical product. So maybe we have to start to change our mind and to find some species that will be able to have the same mechanical properties, the same industrial uses. And then we have to start to change our forest stance. It's a long job, but what we can notice is that the time scale is reducing because now ecosystems are reacting very quickly to any changes.
Mountain areas are exposed to extreme weathers. They have very strong winters, short summers. Plants, and especially the trees in mountain areas, are adapted to a very specific climate. That's why changes can be quickly seen. So small changes are already a big deal for the trees in higher elevations.
I'm working in the mountain center of INRAE, which is located in Grenoble. We are working for all the, let's say, alpine landscape. So yes, it's right that we have some steep slopes And here the main deal is with the communication network, roads, railway, and so on. And it's all on the slope. So by definition, all the forested slopes have a risk of natural hazard. It could be mud throw, it could be a landslide, rockfall, snow avalanches, and so on. And it means that the importance of forest is very high in this area, because if there were no forest, we'll have a lot of problems.
So the landscape we see today, especially the forested landscape, is a result of interactions between human history and vegetation history. We have changed by managing the forest, we have changed the landscape as it is today. Now I think it's time to actively change it again, because climate change is coming up and we need to mitigate the risks of climate change. We need to see which tree species are going to survive, which tree species can help to store CO2, and in this context I think non-native tree species play a very important role.
Mountain area in France, it's less than 25% of the national territory. So it means that we are a quarter of all problems that can be found in France. Problems of agriculture or forestry sometimes are more coming from flat areas in France than from the mountain areas. But mountain areas, they are a kind of living lab, in the way that since you have any change on climatic condition, it will going faster in the mountain area than in the rest of the country. So we are a kind of sentinel. And we have many programs about what is called ecosystem sentinels, in the way to know how ecosystems are reacting and what is happening here in mountain. It's increase about what could happen in all the other area.
Aix-en-Provence, it is a Mediterranean forest around the cities, and this is a hotspot of biodiversity because we have a lot of different landscape. Mediterranean forest, but also mountainous forest in the east of the region, large wetlands in Camargue. So this different landscape is the opportunity to have a different biodiversity in this area. And we have, of course, the coast, which brings another ecosystem, another biodiversity to this hotspot.
At a global level, researchers are trying to identify the hotspots for biodiversity, areas with a lot of species richness, with diversity, which are kind of islands for life. And Mediterranean region is one of those biodiversity hotspots.
I'm assessing and mapping ecosystem services to the municipalities of Arles, so they can pay environmental services to producers.
So the question is how to deal for putting in use payment for ecosystem services to people that are using them. How people are ready to pay for this kind of ecosystem and to help people that are the owners, that are the managers of such area. The objective is to develop specific contract between the owner, the manager, the user and the politics in order to be sure to have the payment of such ecosystem services.
The question is, are we willing to pay when we enter a forest where we are recreating from our stressful life? Are we willing to pay for the fresh air, the fresh water? I think a big question nowadays is how we are going to finance this transition from our traditional way to use natural resources to a landscape that is adapted to climate change. Who is responsible? Who should pay? Is it a matter of solidarity, or is it the matter of the owner's responsibility?
The main activities that have been conducted now are more kind of testing activities in order to see how we can develop this kind of payment, where to find the money, because it's one of the big questions. Because, for example, if I'm coming back to a protective forest, the user of a highway is protected by the forest, but it pays nothing for the management of this forest. So how to find a kind of solidarity between the user, the owner and the manager? This is one of the big deals now in France.
There are no policies in this term. It's only a contract between owners, municipalities and finance. And so maybe it will be interesting for Aéroport of Marignane to mitigate its CO2 gas in the atmosphere with the foresters, the owner, and pay them to mitigate this gas.
One of the big part of our tasks are that we are providing advice to the forest owners, whatever if they are private or working for the state. We are here to giving them a transfer of scientific and technical knowledge and to help them in conducting their forest or to give them advice what has to be done, what has not to be done. But by the end, they are the ones who making the decision. So we are not a kind of regulation services. We are here to really give them the best information that they will need according to the quality of the scientific and technical knowledge for having a good management or a good land use planning by the end.
How is the status of an expert valued in France?
I am considered as an expert, but usually I am like a kind of fireman, because when people have absolutely no solution, then they will come and get in contact with me so that the expert can find something to help them to get out from the hole where they are. So sometimes we are working on very, let's say, difficult expertise or difficult situation. It's also quite interesting in terms of research because we are in the limit of all the models or all these kind of things and we have to adapt. But also in France, as let's say our regulation is quite strong, there is a lot of experts everywhere, and since decision has to be taken, you need to have a kind of external expertise on what will be done. What we are trying to push now is not to be on a single expertise, but what we call a collective expertise, a group of experts. In order to avoid this situation, for example, to be the king on the mountain. So this is very important now because everybody has a small part of the knowledge. So we have to put everybody around the table and then to have a clear talk and discussion and to find this collective solution to the problems we are facing with.
We need an interdisciplinary team to face big challenges which are important for all of us. So you need experts from different fields, from different levels, people who talk with municipalities, who do science communication, experts on forest fires, experts on nature protection. So you need them all on board to have success.
If we are dealing with forest fire, if we are dealing with natural risk protection, not everything, but a lot of things are managed by Paris, in the way that you are not allowed to do whatever you want in your forest, depending on the size, on the area of your property. You are not allowed to do clear cutting if it's on more than 1.5 hectares. So for this, you should have a request to the French administration and they give you or not the green light.
You see very well how important legislation is. In our research on legislation, we discovered a very inhomogeneous network of legislation in place in the European Union, especially also in the Alpine space. That's one of the challenges in ALPTREES, because every country has a very different approach when it comes to forest management, to climate change adaptation. It's all linked to very different structures of legislations. In ALPTREES, we have to detect the current legal situation and also give advises how future legislative responses can look like to respond to all these needs in future.
The mapping of the different ecosystem services, what can it be? Ability of CO2 sequestration, natural risk protection, wetland protection, these kind of things has to be done. People of the administration are using these maps in order to say if you have the right or not to do what you want to do as a management. And there is a big differences between the forest managed by the state service, which is called Office National des Forêts, French Forest National Office, and private foresters. You have to know that in France, since you have more than 10 hectares of forest in only one piece, then you have to do what is called Plan Simple de Gestion, Simple Management Plan, that has been approved by the Forest Administration in France. And if you are an owner of less than 10 hectares, you can do almost what you want, except clear cutting on forest road opening. and also dealing with forest fire, you are obliged to do specific intervention in order to remove small trees, these kind of things. First, all around the houses and place where you have urbanization, but also along forest road or roads. So here in France, the framework is quite well established, and you are not able to do really what you want to do in your forest in such situation.
Are the decisions you are making brought into political actions?
Let's say that it's quite flexible in the way that the regulations that are taken in Paris, they are based on feedbacks from the regions, from the professionals that are concerned by it. For example, going back to protective forest, we have been able to formalize our new knowledge in the way that they have made an update of the forestry code in order to integrate it. So it's working on the both line, from Provence to Paris and from Paris to Provence. And then from this, the decision is taken. So it's working on the both sides, but it's right that usually the first reaction is, okay, this is something new coming from Paris again. But by the end, it's always working on the both sides. The Cerema is under the supervision of this ecological ministry, and INRAE it's under the supervision of agricultural ministry, but also the research one. So it means that with our two institutes, we are under the supervision of three ministries who are in charge of this land use. So we are working with the key actors, in fact.
The line between institutions which produce knowledge and which transport knowledge is often not so easy to detect. So we are very happy that in our project ALPTREES we have institutions which transport the knowledge to the municipalities and those who actually create knowledge. Both are equally important for the success of this project and also for the success of a transnational strategy on non-native tree species.
Do you have the feeling that if you have an idea how to improve something, that it's easy and quick how you can act? Or is the distance to Paris something you all don't like so much?
Okay.
I will say that so it's not reacting as quick as we want, to be very honest. We are on the time scale of forest growth. So things are not done the day after, for sure. It's taking some year, but it's reacting by the end. It's a small world in France. So it means that people are usually making the same school or the same cultural and training activities. So as it is a small world, it's very easy to give the input of new knowledge within these forestry networks because they are very well established and very well functioning. And you have to know also that a lot of big forest owners, they have also political activity. So we have this kind of direct line, let's say, with politicians dealing with forestry things. And as the importance of forest in terms of great public perception is very high, then we have a good hearing from the different components of the administrative system in France.
Important, of course, is the public perception, because with knowing what the public perception of a different topic is, we know what's important to politicians.
If you have a look on a picture of Grenoble, let's say 1 century ago, there were no more forests around Grenoble. And now it's completely forested, and it's natural reforestation. In the French Alps, 38% of the land is covered by forest, which is quite high. In France, the average is about 29%. So this is mainly due to the mountain landscape and that to the fact that forest has place to grow up. There is no fight between agricultural activity and forestry. There is no fight between the need of land use for urbanization and forestry. This is due to the typical topography of this mountain area.
It's very different from Grenoble because we are in a Mediterranean forest and it's not a productive forest, it's a recreative forest. It's very different because our economy is on the tourism in this region. The preoccupation of people now is how to reboost economy which is based on tourism.
In the Nizza area in France, there is a lot of mimosa. Mimosa, it's an invasive tree. You cannot imagine this place without any mimosa. It's part of the touristic picture. This is one of the deal because tourist people, they don't understand that it's nice in the landscape, but it's also invasive. So maybe we have to do something against. It's a kind of challenge between this kind of touristic activity, the attractivity of the landscape, and the reality of the impact of non-native trees.
Patricia and Fred show the complexity very well, especially at the national level in France. So, in conclusion, you see one more time how complicated it is to suggest a tree species for plantation. The choice of tree species and how you manage them, whether in cities or in forests, depend on so many different people. So thank you very much to Fred and Patricia for joining us for this podcast on the situation in France on non-native tree species and many, many aspects more which you tackled.
Au revoir, Katharina.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir, Fred.
Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to the next podcast with our Italian partners.